Okay, so I call this topic Empath 101. Every time I've taught this, it's kind of changed over the years. I remember when I first started the development circles, intuitive development circles, it was coming up a lot that a lot of the people who were joining were really wanting to learn how to protect their energy, not just with people, but also energetically in the spiritual world, right? Like if you have encounters with negative energies, entities, shadow figures, ghosts, like there's all kinds of things that came up in my circles. I've heard horror stories about people who've gotten psychic readings who said that they have like a family curse or like that they have like a negative entity attached to them. And like, I, I'm an intuitive reader as well. And I would absolutely never say that to anybody because you can actually create energy just by believing it's there. So that's actually something I'm gonna talk about later. But those things do exist. Like there's no denying it that there are good people, there are bad people. There's energy that feels good, there's energy that doesn't feel good, and it's physical and non-physical. And it's as an empath, we're sensitive to all of the layers, and it's really important to recognize first that you're an empath because that will make sense of a lot of things that maybe don't make sense. And I'll tell a little bit about my story to kind of help you know what I'm talking about. And also the second thing is to have education about like how does energy work, because then you will have basically the power and the keys to know what to do in certain situations where you may become overwhelmed or overtaken or out of balance and out of center with yourself and all of the layers of energy that there are. So let me introduce myself real quick. So I'm Christine. I am a medium. I'm an intuitive. I am an empath. I'm going to talk about different types of empaths and the different types. There's so many different types of empaths. There's no way I'm going to be able to talk about all of them, but the ones I'm going to talk about are all ones I've experienced. So I've experienced many layers of perceiving energy and picking up on energy. And so I love going into detail about all the different nuances to being an empath because there's so many layers. And I grew up with alcoholic, kind of non-empathetic caregivers. I had a lot of really traumatic experiences, everything from physical abuse, emotional abuse to sexual abuse. And I was also experiencing at the same time tremendously healing spiritual experiences with angels, with fairies, with ancestors, with healing guides. And at the same time, I was having terrifying spiritual experiences with shadow figures, dark energies, unhappy spirits of humans that wanted to talk to me, that would not let me sleep. And so at a very, very young age, I had to learn boundaries. And people didn't teach me what to do. It was just something that I innately knew how to do. And I hear this a lot about people who are empathic and really open to the spiritual dimensions, is that they have some sort of innate understanding about how to use their energy already because we've had many lifetimes, if you believe in past lives, right? We're not just coming into this life not having any previous knowledge about how to be a spirit in a body. So at a young age, I learned how to navigate um, toxic people, toxic spiritual energies. And at the same time, I had very, very amazing healing experiences from the spiritual dimension too. So I grew up knowing that there's gifts and there's burdens to being sensitive. There's gifts and there's burdens to the ways that we learn to cope that may not be the best ways. And this is what I am really passionate about, is helping empaths to kind of undo some of the things that they may have just instinctually done for survival in early years as being a highly sensitive empathic person, and kind of turning that around and using it as a superpower instead. Because if you're unconscious and unaware of your sensitivities, it does feel like they're in control and they overtake you and overwhelm you. So empath empowerment is huge to me. And also giving education about the energy body, about boundaries, about speaking your truth, about what's healthy, what's not healthy, red flags, green flags, both from the spiritual dimension and with humans, is really, really imperative too, because it's really easy for empaths that are unaware of their sensitivities to get lost in the confusion of the reflections and projections that they're getting from people or from the spiritual world. And they kind of lose themselves in it because they're so permeable. And so a big part of what I'm going to talk about today also is the tools that are really helpful for empaths to really get a centered sense of self. that we really have to fill ourselves up with our whole selves, with our true selves. Because the dysfunctional coping that a lot of empaths do in early years, if they've come from traumatic childhoods, either from the spiritual dimension or from humans, is to like be a chameleon, to be like passive, to kind of contort yourself, to be safe, to keep the balance, to keep the harmony. And what that ultimately does is it stifles your energy, it constricts your energy field. And it just isn't a long-term way of navigating the world. If you want to thrive physically, if you want to thrive spiritually, emotionally, mentally, you got to learn how to undo some of that. And thankfully, as adults, we have a lot more choice around the environments we're in, around the people we're around, and also how we're going to relate to the spiritual dimension. So we just have so much education and knowledge to our fingertips that like we need to be accessing this and basically getting the how-to manual of like how to navigate the world as an empath. And I have to say, what I was saying before I started recording is the Empath 101 class has many evolutions. I've been teaching this since like 2017. When I first started my development circles, we were doing them like every week. And then we kind of over time after the pandemic slowed down. But there's been hundreds of people that have come through the space who all share the same concerns, the same problems with being really highly sensitive and being an empath. And in the beginning, when I taught this, the focus of a lot of people, and also myself, was how do I protect myself? How do I separate myself? How do I know what's mine, what's theirs? Like, I don't know what to do or what's happening. And I remember in the early development of me figuring out I was an empath, I ran across a lot of information about protection. And over the years, I have a very different perception about that. I think that it is important to feel protected and safe for empaths above all else. That's like the number one priority for empaths. If they're going to really flourish, they have to feel safe. But if you're coming from an energy of, I need to protect and basically disconnect and shield myself, that's coming from a place of like fear. And while that may be the way that you cope, and so you can learn a more empowered way to like protect yourself, which I would actually say empower yourself, not protect yourself, you could inevitably be attracting negative experiences, negative people, because you're defensive, your defenses are up, and it almost like attracts negative energy. And this is something that I innately knew as a child, very young child, sleeping at night and sensing like shadow figures and things that were just like penetrating their consciousness and awareness onto me, and feeling a sense of like them wanting to take me over. And somehow on some level, I knew that if I gave them my fear, if I gave them my attention, if I gave them any kind of sense of like belief that they could do that, that they would be able to. And so I learned to detach my energy, even though I could feel and sense them there, detach my energy from them and like hone in and say something positive and fill my energy up with light. And that was something I just innately did. And it worked. It worked for a very long time. And it's not too unlike how I figure things out as an adult. It's like, if we're coming from a place of like, you can impact me, you can influence me, you can manipulate my energy, you have power over me, that you actually begin to have that kind of relationship with energy. And it's really a matter of like, no, I will not allow this. I'm going to fill myself up with what I want to be filled up with. And that's how I'm going to be. And that's what I'm talking about later too, is like turning your energy from really sussing out the energies around you for what's safe or not safe. And also, how is everyone else feeling? What are they doing? What are they thinking? And being really outwardly focused, which is a survival skill, to drawing your energy in and be like, how am I feeling? What am I needing? You know, where am I at in this situation? And orienting from the inside out. It is a switch that I see a lot of empaths go through as they get the skills, the tools, the education and knowledge about energy. They begin to make that switch, and they have more felt sense of control over themselves, more felt sense of control over energies around them, more felt sense of control about what to do when they're in a situation where they're confronted with an overwhelming, powerful, uncomfortable energy. And it makes all the difference between what I would say is like a empath that's in survival mode and an empath that's in like a mode of empowerment. And I've witnessed the progression of like hundreds of people who have gone from the fear, I need to protect myself, into, okay, I know who I am, I know what my energy is, I know what it's not, and this is what I do in these situations. And it's amazing to see that. So that's my hope for you as I explain the journey, the things that I see that are repeated in the development of transformation from the fear-based to basically being filled with love, um, of the self, and focusing on the self first above else. It shifts everything. So the whole like quote that we hear time and time again in spiritual scripts everywhere is like, love is the only truth. And honestly, that is the empath's like power motto. Because when we get into fear, when we get into survival mode, what we feel, we create. We really manifest things from our state of feeling, even more so than other people. So I'm going to answer some questions first. I'm going to do quite a bit of talking with this workshop today. Usually I do like maybe 20, 40 minutes, and then I do a meditation. And then we'll kind of come together, have a discussion, and do some practicing together with playing with energy, getting to know our energy. Today is a little more heavier on education because I have a lot to say on the topic. And I really know that there's a couple people that are really, that are going to be watching this that really need this information right now. So what is an empath? An empath is, well, they say that there's about 1% to 2% of people in the world that can be considered an empath. It's the same percentage of people that fall into the INFJ typology. Have you ever heard about the Myers-Briggs typology? It could be ENFJ, it could be INFJ, but basically intuitive feeling-based people is what it means. And it is a small part of the population. We are a minority. And that's actually one of the biggest challenges. The common challenges I see with empaths is that they feel like they don't fit in the world because they are a minority. Other people don't understand why they feel so much, why they're so overwhelmed by simple things, why certain things matter to them. Because the majority of the world is thinking, is analytical, logical, and the empaths are very much in the realm of the irrational, the creative, the intuitive, the feeling-based. And it's intangible. And yet at the same time, like I said, it's a superpower because we can sense things before they come. We can know things that other people can't know, that aren't apparent. They're not in the physical. We're very highly sensitive to what I call the non-physical world. So they are deeply caring people. They're very attuned to others, to the outer world. There's so many levels of awareness that empaths have. It could be with animals, it could be with plants, it could be with other humans, it could be with weather patterns, it could be with nature, it could be with the collective, it could be with what's going on politically, it could be going on with what's going on physically in people's bodies, a physical empath. And basically, empaths are just very attuned and aware of what's going on around them. So much so that sometimes it feels like it's their own stuff. And so that's the number one thing that I hear with empaths. It's like, how do I begin to parse out what's mine and what's not mine? And that was my biggest challenge. I didn't even know I was an empath until after I had my son, after I was 30 years old. I had a lot of spiritual experiences as a kid. I had a near-death experience. Like I said, every night I had these shadow figures. I had ghost interactions. I had things fly across the room. I had all kinds of weird spiritual, paranormal stuff happening. And I had a lot of fear around it as a kid. And then I inevitably in my 20s just shut it all down. I was still obviously highly sensitive and empathic, but I was trying to fit in and belong and just be like, I just want to be like everyone else. I don't want to be like this, right? And that's kind of what we're like conditioned and molded to be. It's the norm, which is not what the empath is. The empath is not the norm. They are the exception in this case. So a lot of empaths have a similar story where they have a period of time where they shut it down. And I did that through just doing a lot of stuff. I worked a lot. I was going to school. I smoked cigarettes. I drank alcohol. Those are all things, ways of me grounding and like coping with the energy of things. Stayed really busy with physical things. Then it was after the birth of my son that it just kind of ripped me wide open. It was another near-death experience for me. I almost died. And I was really vulnerable and sensitive and kind of like ripped wide open. Literally, they cut me open at a C-section. But I just felt like I didn't have control over my sensitivity at all after that. Um, and so I realized like there's something going on here. And I was having spiritual experiences, and that's when I decided to do intuitive development and realize that I think I have something else going on that other people don't understand. And I went to a psychic development class and had never, ever had a reading before, never had a psychic reading, never had a mediumship reading. I'd seen it on TV. I was even skeptical about it, which is hilarious looking back at it all. And like we would sit in front of each other and we would have to like do certain exercises and just say what we're picking up on people. And I was so in my head and I was so used to censoring myself. And I was like, I'm not getting anything. I'm not getting anything. I'm not getting anything. And, with the help of everyone around me and the teacher that was in the class, it was like, anything you get is valid and important. And I was like, but that's not what I've been told my whole life. My whole life, it's like, you don't pay attention to like the random things. And my whole life I would like randomly know something or be compelled to like say a word to a complete stranger that like didn't make sense, or I would randomly get weird smells, or I would get weird sensations in my body. And like I just thought I was a weird person. I just like everyone else thought I was weird. And in this respect, it was like I needed to do that, and I had for like almost the whole 10 years shut that down. So I had to undo that suppression basically and be like, okay, like really clear out all of the ways I had blocked that and allow myself to be receptive again, to receive whatever energy I'm sensing from the person or whatever we're doing. And I started to realize really quick through psychic development that I was picking up stuff, and I was telling myself that I was making it up. And yet when I would say it would resonate with the person in front of me and it made sense to them. And it would just blow my mind every time. And I was like, how is this possible? How is it possible that I'm getting accurate information like out of thin air? And actually in research, they call it anomalous information reception, because the acronym is AIR, because it's literally like you're pulling out information from the air. And it changed my perception on my whole life. I looked back on my life and I went, oh my gosh, all these times when I felt something or sensed something or had these experiences that I dismissed, and then they came up to be true. And I was like, I should have listened to that. I should have listened to my gut feeling. I should have trusted that, but I didn't. This is kind of like my core wounding actually in my life. I had repetitive nightmares my whole life of me being in situations in my dreams where someone is, I'm in a situation where I can sense that something bad is going to happen, and I tell everybody and no one believes me. And then I don't believe myself in the dream. And then the bad thing happens. And then I go see, and then I feel really shameful because I didn't listen to myself. And spirit seriously has knocked me over the head with a 2x4 over and over again, because I still to this day do not always listen. It's like we're so conditioned not to trust feeling. We're so conditioned not to trust strange impulses. Like I want to move across the country all of a sudden and I don't know why. And they're like, that's really stupid. Why would you do that? Right. But what I've learned in my life, looking back, when I ignored the nudge, the gut impulse, the intuitive hints of what would be good for me, things were not easy. I was going against myself, and I didn't even know I was doing that, because our culture doesn't value that. So that's one of the biggest things that empaths have to undo, is the conditioning that we get from the culture, that those things are untrustworthy, that they're irrational, that that logic and intellect is superior, which it is for the majority of the population. That is the way they function. But for us empaths, we're, like I said, we're not the norm, we're the exception. We have to listen to those nudges. That is like an advantage we have. It is the superpower to listen to that. Other people don't have that as intensely. I do believe everyone has access to that, but for some reason, 1% to 2% of the population is just much more open and receptive to it from the get-go. And what I hear time and time again in the stories of empaths is that when they don't listen, they get sick, or something goes bad, or something feels wrong, or they build anxiety over time because they're not listening to the cues of their soul, of their body. And that's the other thing I want to say, like empaths, they perceive and they receive guidance from so many layers other than just intuition, which is something that I didn't teach the first time around. Like I said, Empath 101 has evolved over the years. The last time and this time, I've included what I call the multidimensional awareness. There's many dimensions of the self and of the world that we perceive. And having language and words and descriptions of what those layers are is like so life-changing for an empath, because it's like, oh, that's why. It just helps to take the confusion out of energy stuff that happens to us. Like if we don't know what the energy is, we almost don't even know what to do with it, right? But so it's like information can be so helpful with this. So this is what I hope to give you today, is some of the information that helps you understand the layers that might be happening with you. So I use the word soul senses, but in the mainstream world of intuitive development, they call it psychic senses, the 5 clairs, which just means like clear perceptions. I call them soul senses because they are the experiences that people have when they're not in body. And I'm a medium, so I communicate with spirit, people who have passed away, and they're still able to communicate to me. They can still see, hear, feel, smell, taste, touch. Like they can know things. They're thinking, they're speaking. Like they have those senses still, but they're not in a physical body. And so we have that same capability to see, hear, feel, taste, touch, and know things in a non-physical way as an empath. And it's important to know that. So it's like you can have, when I was doing the psychic development, remember I was like, I was getting things, but I was censoring. I was like, I'm just getting a random image of like a pink tea kettle. Like, what does that mean? That's so ridiculous, right? But like when I had to force myself to just say what I was getting in front of a person, the pink tea kettle ended up being really significant to whatever the exercise we were doing. And I don't know that. And it's like, okay, so I could see images that I feel like are just random things popping in my mind. Images and pictures of the future and past can happen too. So that happened to me after my head trauma. I had a lot of what they call retrocognition and precognition, which means just like almost like movies playing in my head, like a memory, but of things from other people's past. I would like literally see memories of other people, or I would see memories that hadn't happened yet. So future things that were going to happen as if it was a memory. And it was very confusing because I didn't know what was happening to me back then. I wish I would have known this stuff. It would have changed everything for me. Some people, empaths, a lot of empaths have clairsentience, which they call clear inner feeling. So that means you feel the energy of things. You feel the emotion of people as if it's your own. It literally, your body is actually like a mirror, a gigantic mirror neuron, and it reflects what's around it. And there's a lot of theories as to like why some people develop this more than others. And there is a link to childhood trauma and empaths doing this as a way to survive, especially if they had inconsistent, erratic caregivers that were not predictable or consistent in their mood. So that was my case for sure. And so every time I would enter a space with my caregiver or like other family members that were unpredictable and kind of volatile and toxic, I would immediately know what is their state of being. Are they angry at this moment? Are they calm? Are they happy? Are they feeling depressed? I would walk into the space and feel it. And then I would know how to approach the situation safely. Because obviously if they're angry, I'm going to go invisible and leave the situation. If they're volatile, I'm definitely going to do the same thing. If they're sad, I might approach them in comfort. If they're happy, I might engage in conversation, right? Like I adapt my approach to this person based on what I'm feeling. And that is such a superpower. Like a lot of people don't do that. And that's one of the things that empaths really struggle with in as they grow up, is being like, how do other people not know what's going on with me? Like, how come they're not in sync with what's going on with me and tuned to me? And they feel really misunderstood by everybody. But when you realize that like that ability is so rare in the main population, that we expect others to experience life the same way we do, it's actually a tremendous lie. And it's also going to set you up for disappointment time and time and time again, because it's so rare to find people who will be able to be attuned to you in that way. It's really a gift. And that's why I say, like, it's good if you can find empathic friends, because then they relate to you on the same level. And it's amazing. I can say that I don't believe I was around any empathic people until I did the intuitive development. And I was like, holy crap, there's other people like me. And it was just so refreshing. It was like, I don't know, it's just amazing. But there's a lot of chronic disappointment because they expect other people to understand them, to see and feel and know them the same way that they see and feel other people. And it is heartbreaking that they don't get what they give. But it is because it is a rare thing. And you have to realize that not everyone has that capability. They haven't developed that capability. Another form of clairsentience is physical empaths. So this is definitely me as well, which I don't know if I had a lot of early experiences with this. It's hard for me to tell because I didn't know what any of this was back then, but I did have really weird physical symptoms and stuff going on. And I definitely can say that after the birth of my son, which was really like a second spiritual awakening for me, this was like the number one thing that was happening to me that led me to do intuitive development, because I was doing Reiki with people and in the same physical space. And I was having these really weird things happening in my body, both because I was picking up on what was physically going on with them, and because I was picking up what was physically going on with their deceased loved ones, which was really traumatizing, because I would be doing Reiki on somebody and suddenly I would feel like I'm having a heart attack, or suddenly I'd feel like I got shot. And I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know. I just was trying to be like, okay, don't act weird. Just keep doing the energy healing. Who knows what that is? Who knows what I'm feeling, right? And when I told my Reiki master what I was experiencing, she was like, oh, I think that you're picking up on the spirit. And I was like, the what? So that's really another reason why I was propelled into intuitive development, because I was like, I don't want to feel other people's pain. I don't want to feel the way people died. Like, that's not, I can't function. So I learned how to use my energy. Reiki taught me a lot of energy practices too. And so a lot of people are physical empaths and they don't even know it. And what happens is empaths, they process, if they're a physical empath, they may be processing other people's emotions or physical symptoms through their body when they're around somebody. And it's completely unconscious. Like, it's not something you're wanting to do. It's necessarily consciously doing. It's just part of us being receptive to the non-physical world around us, because we're so attuned. Our energy is so outward focused, fully present with the person or the animal or the place or the thing in front of us, that we merge with it. We literally blend our energy together, and the definition between me and you becomes the same. And so you begin to process and feel the same things that the living being in front of you is too. And if you're really unconscious of this is really, really dangerous, because it can have an extreme physical toll on your body. I also want to say, even if you are aware of it, but this is something you just naturally do, or maybe like you're a healer or a medium. I've done a lot of research on healers and mediums and their gifts and also their health conditions. And what we've seen is that the studies on mediums specifically, they are over 50% of them struggle with chronic mystery illnesses. And I do believe that, because tuning into energies outside of them does take a physical toll. It doesn't have to. I mean, these are mediums that were trained how to do their energy properly too. It just is a cost. There's a cost to this empathy, basically. If you're physical or medium empath, it's really, really essential to learn energetic protection and like, not protection, empowerment, right? To like run the energy in a way that doesn't take anything from you. But it does have an energetic cost, and it is shown in the research that highly sensitive people, specifically mediums and channels, do struggle with more physical ailments than the normal population of people, or even psychics specifically, because they are blending and merging with energies more frequently. These are people who do it professionally, so this is what they're doing like most of the time. The other soul senses are clairaudience and claircognizance, which is like inner hearing or just knowing. And these are things like you just kind of like know how to do something that you didn't know how to do, which was definitely my experience as a kid. I remember I was like 10 years old watching my dad change brakes on a car. And he's like, it's not going on. He was all frustrated. My dad is like probably in his 30s at this point and has changed brakes lots of times. And I reached out, grabbed it, and I put it on. I have no idea how I knew how to do it. I just could see it. It was like I could see what he wasn't seeing. And like I have so many instances of that where it's like I just knew how to do something that I should know how to do. I've never been trained, I've never done this before, and yet I can see how to do it. It's just like you get a download of knowing, right? Same thing with a lot of empaths get downloads about other people, a deeper understanding as to the why behind why they're feeling and why they're behaving the way they are, seeing at a deeper level, seeing the shadow, seeing the unconscious aspect of somebody. This is probably one of the biggest challenges of empaths is like, do I tell them? Do I say something? When is it my role? When is it not my role? What is the ethics around that? And I can say a lot of people who haven't done the development blurt shit out. And it's very triggering. Most people don't want to be seen at that level. It's very like vulnerable. It's like you're looking into their panty drawer, right? Like you're looking into the spaces that they don't want you to see. And so if you're like a professional psychic or medium, like what I do, it's like people come to you because they want to know what they're not saying, right? It's a different relationship. But out in the public, it's like a lot of the people I've helped develop their gifts, it's like they feel such a build of energy in them that it's almost like they have to just like get it out. But if it is not ethical, or if it feels like it's going to harm someone, or like the unethical things I've heard people get during readings, like someone telling them that they have a curse, or that when they're going to die and how they're going to die, like things that are just not ethical to say or do, you don't have to tell them. You can actually witness it and then drain the energy out without actually telling the person. You don't have to say everything you receive